There's something incredibly powerful about a woman who's come into her own. You've been through life, you've loved, lost, struggled, built, rebuilt, you've got your own rhythm now, your routines, your passions, your people, your peace. And yet, somewhere along the way, we've all felt that pull, that subtle pressure to shift, to bend, to compromise just a little too much, especially when it comes to love. Let me say something clearly. Never sacrifice your independence for a man. I don't care how charming he is, how lonely you've been, or how magical it all feels at the beginning. If it starts to cost you your independence, it's too expensive. Now, I'm not talking about being stubborn or emotionally unavailable. Independence isn't about never letting someone in. It's about knowing who you are and protecting the life you've built. Not because you're closed off, but because you finally know how much you're worth. Too many women, especially those who have spent years taking care of everyone else, fall into this trap. You meet someone who brings that spark back, and before you know it, you're shifting things around to make him comfortable, canceling your plans, letting his problems take priority, starting to apologize for being too busy or too ambitious. You stop going to your workout classes because he wants more time. You skip the trip with your girlfriends because he seems a bit insecure. You start saying yes when you really mean not tonight. And then, little by little, you lose touch with the woman you've worked so hard to become. Why do we do this? Because we're taught that love is about compromise, and that's true to a point, but there's a difference between compromise and self-erasure. If the relationship starts demanding that you give up what makes you feel strong, fulfilled, or grounded, that's not love, that's control, whether it's obvious or subtle. You should never feel guilty for having a life outside of him. You should never have to explain why your dreams still matter. You're not asking for permission to be yourself. You don't need someone to validate your choices. You've earned the right to trust your own voice. And let's be honest, any man who is intimidated by your independence is not your match. A real partner doesn't just tolerate your strength. He's drawn to it. He admires the woman who walks into a room with purpose. He doesn't need to shrink your world to feel more secure in his. He stands beside you, proud of the fire you carry. Sometimes the loneliest place to be is in a relationship where you can't be yourself. And when you start sacrificing your independence, you're no longer showing up as the vibrant, grounded, passionate woman you are. You're performing a version of yourself that fits the role he wants. And that's exhausting. Let him rise to your level. Let him meet you in the life you've built. Don't shrink your world to fit into his. You've got momentum. You've got your own purpose. That doesn't stop because someone new shows up. If anything, the right relationship should amplify that. It should bring more energy, more ideas, more freedom, not less. I know it can feel risky, especially if you've been single for a while. You meet someone and it feels good and you don't want to lose it. But trust me on this. If you have to give up yourself to keep him, you're already losing. There's a kind of love that doesn't ask you to abandon your life. It doesn't ask you to dim your light. It wants to stand beside it, walk alongside it, and builds something with you, not on top of you, that's deeper than separation. And that's why I want to say this, Mike. At the start, I said, protect it, celebrate it, celebrate the selflessness, so little, so honest, because the right man won't be threatened by it. He'll fall in love with it. And if he doesn't, let him go. You've lived enough life to know what it means to love someone deeply. You've poured your heart into people, made sacrifices, endured heartbreak, maybe even stayed longer than you should have because you believed in the potential of what it could be. And over time, that kind of emotional history can start to wear down your standards, not because you don't know what you deserve, but because you've been trained to be understanding, patient, forgiving, sometimes to a fault. But let me say this with complete clarity. Never lower your standards for love. Not now, not ever. You've come too far, grown too much, and survived too many disappointments to start settling for crumbs when you deserve the whole damn meal. Lowering your standards doesn't usually happen all at once. It's subtle. It's small decisions that build up over time. You let him cancel plans a few too many times. You brush off that comment that made you uncomfortable. You start telling yourself, well, maybe I'm expecting too much, or no one's perfect, right? And before you know it, you're in something that doesn't reflect the kind of love you were meant to have. The danger here is not just being with the wrong person. It's what staying with the wrong person does to your sense of self. It chips away at your confidence. It makes you question your instincts. You begin to confuse tolerance with love and silence with strength. You might convince yourself that you're being mature by letting certain things slide. And sure, maturity does mean being able to overlook small imperfections, but let's not pretend that basic respect, emotional availability, communication, loyalty, these are not nice to haves. They are minimums. You are not asking for too much by expecting consistency. You are not being difficult by wanting someone who shows up when they say they will, who listens, who supports your dreams, who treats you like a priority. What happens far too often is women start to adjust their expectations because they're tired. Tired of dating, tired of disappointment, tired of feeling like maybe the person they're looking for does. And in that fatigue, you start to entertain people who show just enough effort to keep you around, but never enough to make you feel truly loved. Let me remind you of something. Standards are not walls, they are filters. They're not there to push people away, they're there to protect you from what doesn't serve you. And the people who belong in your life will rise to them, not resent them. If a man sees your standards as too much, let him walk. That reaction is not a red flag. It's a gift, because what it means is you've just avoided months, maybe years of carrying a relationship that was never going to meet your needs. And sometimes the hardest person to walk away from is the one who's almost right, the one who's charming or sweet or amazing in some ways, but just can't give you the emotional depth, honesty, or consistency you need. That's the person who makes you second guess yourself the most, because you keep thinking, if I just hang in there a little longer, maybe he'll change. He might change, but he might not. And that's not your responsibility to wait around and find out. Your job is not to sit in a relationship hoping it turns into what you deserve. Your job is to be so grounded in your worth that you'd rather be alone than with someone who only offers you halfway love. The reality is, when you lower your standards, you don't just make space for the wrong people, you block space for the right ones. The energy you pour into tolerating someone who's not quite enough is energy that could be spent living your life, building your joy, and being emotionally available when someone who is enough comes along. I know it's easy to feel like time is running out. I know there's this pressure, spoken or unspoken, that you should just settle down already. But love isn't a race. And settling down should never mean settling for less. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly where you need to be. As long as you're staying true to who you are and what you know you need to thrive in love, your standards are a reflection of your growth. Don't dull them down for someone who hasn't done the work to meet them. One of the most exhausting roles a woman can take on in a relationship is the one where she's constantly fixing, saving, or emotionally carrying a man who should be standing on his own 2 feet. And what's tricky is that it doesn't always start out that way. Sometimes it begins with something innocent. He opens up about a tough past. You empathize. You want to be there for him. That's human. That's love. But if you're not careful, it can quickly turn into something far more unbalanced, where you're no longer his partner, you've become his emotional life support. Let me say this as clearly as I can: never mother or fix a grown man. That's not your job. And more importantly, it's not the foundation of healthy love. A relationship should be a partnership, not a project. Now, I understand why it happens, especially for women who are nurturing by nature, who've raised children, who've taken care of families, who know how to hold people together, even when everything's falling apart. You've spent years developing that strength, that resilience. So when you meet a man who's struggling, who has wounds, who maybe hasn't quite figured himself out yet, your instinct might be to step in and help him become who he's capable of being. But here's the trap. When you do that, you begin to invest in his potential instead of his reality. You fall in love with the idea of who he could be, not the actual man standing in front of you. And relationships based on potential are dangerous because they keep you stuck in a cycle of hoping, waiting, and over submission while he gets to stay exactly where he is because you're doing all the heavy lifting. A grown man who wants to change will. He doesn't need convincing. He doesn't need you to carry his emotional weight or explain his childhood trauma back to him. He doesn't need a second mum. He needs to do the work. And if he won't, that's not your failure. That's not your burden. It's incredibly common to hear women say, but he's been through so much, or he's never had someone really love him like this before. And that may be true, but what matters is not where he's been. It's what he's doing with it now. Is he showing up? Is he taking responsibility for his healing? Or is he leaning on your kindness as a crutch? When you become the emotional caretaker in a relationship, it creates an unhealthy dynamic. You start excusing bad behavior because you understand where it comes from. You end up neglecting your own needs because his always feel more urgent. You stop holding him accountable because you're too focused on managing his moods, his fears, his insecurities. And slowly, without even realizing it, you disappear. I've seen so many women, smart, powerful, loving women, pour themselves into relationships like this. They do it out of love, yes, but also out of fear. The fear that if they stop giving, they'll lose him. That if they stop fixing, he'll fall apart. That if they start expecting more, he'll walk away. But here's the truth. If your love is the only thing keeping him together, he's not ready for a relationship. And if someone walks away just because you stop solving their problems, they were never truly present to begin with. You deserve someone who comes to the table whole, or at least aware enough to be working on it themselves. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink, to strain, or to sacrifice your peace to hold someone else together. It's two people who are already standing tall, choosing to walk beside each other, not one dragging the other uphill every single day. Letting a man do his own work is not cold, it's not selfish, it's respect. It's saying, I believe in your ability to handle your life, and I'm not going to rob you of that by doing it for you. That's not just love, that's dignity. That's partnership. So the next time you feel that pull to jump in and save someone, pause and ask yourself, is this support or is this sacrifice? Because when you cross that line, you're no longer in a relationship, you're in a role. And no matter how much you give, no matter how hard you try, love doesn't grow when one person is parenting the other. You are not here to raise a man. There's a moment many women recognize where you're sitting across from someone you care about, feeling something twist in your stomach because you want to say something real, something true, but you don't. You bite your tongue. You smile. You tell yourself it's not worth the argument. And you do that not because you don't have a voice, but because over time you've learned to fear what might happen when you actually use it. Here's the truth. You should never abandon your voice just to keep the peace. Because every time you silence yourself to protect someone else's comfort, you chip away at your own. This doesn't mean you have to be combative or confrontational. It's not about creating drama where there is none. It's about honoring what you feel, what you need, and what you know in your gut is right, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it risks shaking things up. Your voice is. And if love demands that you stay quiet to keep it, that's not love. It's control dressed in politeness. A lot of women, especially those who've had relationships in the past where speaking up was met with defensiveness, gaslighting, or outright dismissal, start to internalize this idea that their feelings are too much, that expressing concerns will push him away. So they become masters at managing tension. They read the room. They keep things light. They become accommodating to the point where they forget what it's like to actually ask for what they want. But here's what I want to say. Your opinions, your boundaries, your discomfort, they matter. And the right man will want to hear them even when it's hard. In fact, that's how you know it's the right man. He leans in when you speak up. He doesn't punish you for your honesty. He welcomes it, because that's how a real connection is built. When you stay silent, when you suppress your truth to avoid upsetting someone, you may keep the relationship calm, but it becomes a calm that costs you your authenticity. You begin to second guess yourself. You begin to resent things quietly. You walk on eggshells. And eventually that resentment builds. Even if you're not consciously aware of it, it seeps into the way you show up, your energy, your affection, your trust. Silence has a weight, and when it's filled with everything you should have said but didn't, it's exhausting. Real intimacy doesn't come from pretending everything's fine. It comes from being seen. All of you, not just the agreeable parts, not just the easy to love parts. The messy parts, the parts that hurt, the parts that want more. That's where connection lives. And if a man can't meet you there, if he's only available for the parts of you that don't challenge him, then what you have isn't intimacy. It's performance. You don't need to be palatable. You don't need to make yourself smaller so he feels bigger. You don't need to constantly be the one who lets it go for the sake of harmony. That's not emotional strength. That's emotional suppression. And you've spent too many years becoming this version of yourself to mute her now. I know it's tempting to think, well, it's just this one thing. I'll let it slide. But those just one things start to stack up. And then one day you look around and realize that you've built an entire relationship on the foundation of compromise. But not the healthy kind, the kind where you gave up your needs, your values, your voice, all in the name of being easy to love. And it's not just about what you say, it's about what you allow. It's about having the courage to name it when something doesn't sit right with you. It's about telling the truth even when your voice shakes. It's about not abandoning yourself to avoid being abandoned by someone else. Because the moment you start hiding who you are to keep someone close, you've already lost the most important part of the relationship. Your voice doesn't make you hard to love. It makes you real.